trying to...
You want me to call the roll?
Yeah.
Okay. I can hear myself, so I know we're on.
Yeah.
Your vice chair is not present. Mr. Edwards, he's here. Mr. Martin?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
He's right out there.
He's behind there. He's here. Dr. Solano? Here. Mr. Stavros? He's here. Mr. Temple is not here. Mr. Tripp is here, and Dr. Zachariah is present. You have a quorum.
Great, thank you.
Quiet, everybody back there. Audience, President Medic. Governor Stavros.
Good morning, everyone. I want to call the Student Affairs and Campus Life Committee to order. I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of the minutes. Any discussion or additions or edits? All in favor? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Would also like to go through, we have two different regulations of the minutes for the, I need to ask for approval of the regulations for public notice for two different regulations that we're going to be passing today. The first regulation, I believe you've all been briefed and it's in your packages, is BOG Regulation 6.014 relating to student governments. Basically, this regulation will allow for a regulatory framework for University Board of Trustees to establish a regulation for the structure and operation of student governments. UBOT may establish a student government on any branch, campus, or center, and the regulation calls for the establishment of internal operating procedures approved by the University Board of Trustees, and it also calls for student government members to adhere to the University Code of Conduct. Does anyone have any questions related to this regulation? Okay. If not, I'd entertain a motion to forward this regulation to the full board to be formally noticed.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our second regulation is BOG Regulation 6.015 relating to student records and reports. This regulation is being repealed because the state universities must comply with federal requirements for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This act protects for the privacy of student educational records and also ensures student access to educational records. The board is recommending the repeal of this regulation to prevent inconsistency with the federal laws. Are there any questions relating to this regulation? Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will be, if you do have any, I know Vicki Shirley's been working with everybody and going through that, so if anybody has any questions, she's not here today, but feel free to reach out with her. We have been, as you remember from our meeting, I guess maybe 2 meetings ago, had a great discussion on the Veteran Student Services Project, and I'd like to ask Richard Stevens to come up. While he's working his way up, he's going to give us an update on this, but Dr. Marshall, who unfortunately had to leave, represented us as the governor launched our Boots to Books program, and I know Governor Stavros has been very active in working with this. And also, President Genshaft has been really out there, and it was great to see that this was one of those things that, as I read the clips and a lot of the national news, that everyone's kind of doing, but I really think we were ahead of the curve on this one, and we're helping set the pace and lead the record, and wanted to thank President Genshaft for her leadership on it, and to go ahead and ask Richard to give us an update on the rest of our issues there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
Speak up.
No, that home is not close enough to anybody's now.
Okay, on what we included in this particular agenda package, and starting on page 12 of your committee agenda, is basically a final survey that we did following up on the work group that was pulled together to examine the veteran services offered throughout the university system. And you'll remember in March that we did come forward with the recommendations of that work group. And the primary recommendation that was supported by the veteran students who also spoke in March was to establish a one-stop student veteran support center. So So what we did going back out to the universities is we kind of reorganized our survey in a way to where we could capture the current status of the different services that were associated with that one-stop service center. And you'll see those going across the top of your table on page 12. And then also, ask each university, what is your current level of service based on the key that you see, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and what are you willing or able to commit to in this budget environment, and as we expect the new veterans to come in. So all we're providing at this time is basically the summary of the university responses, and you'll see that some of them are basically, committing to improve certain levels of service. Others are just not in a position to do so at this time, and certainly some are not in a position to do it unless they're able to pull up additional funding for staffing or for training. And what we did is then we asked them to basically identify how they would try to accomplish a one-stop service center on their campus, their main campus. We also approached the same questions for the branch campus, and that's table 2. You'll see a lot of NA there, and that's basically those institutions that do not have a branch campus at this time. And you'll also notice that there's a lot more ones on the branch campuses than there are on the main campus. And this is because on the branch campuses you typically have one person that might be wearing 3 or 4 different hats in student services. So it's really more of an anomaly that happens because of the smaller staff that is on the branch campus. Table 3 then identifies some other areas that have been recommended by the work group. And as you can see, one of the main things we wanted to do was make sure that each university had a website that was linked back to the state website. And at the time this survey was completed, we had 5 that had that in place, and we had 6 that were in the process of doing so. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail on each of these. I'll certainly try to answer any questions. But primarily what we're wanting to do now is use this information going forward over the summer to continue to work with those universities that want to try to improve their services, but also, as was mentioned earlier, the University of South Florida is planning to help establish a statewide drive-in conference on veteran services and veteran affairs in November 6th. And I'm trying to steal President Kinshap's thunder on that, but basically what that will allow is an opportunity for the people throughout the system to come together, share best practices with each other, because by then we'll know a lot of the problems we're going to encounter with this new group of veterans coming in. And we'll also have a better idea of the volume of new students we'll get.
President Gimshaft, you want to add anything?
Yes, this is, November 6th is the Friday, and it's a day that I hope everybody can put on their calendar. We have the only program in the country that has been started by the veterans called Vet Success. And it's the veterans have given us a person who is a veteran, who is a college graduate, and is going to help us with advising students so that they are better able to get their services and their benefits. This is great. We had a big announcement about this, and at the time, the person that's second to General Shinseki, I believe his name is, came down, and he is willing to fund this whole conference. We're having people come in from Washington, D.C., the American Council on Education Veterans Division person is coming down to speak, and there'll be different settings, different seminar rooms, so that whatever the discipline is that you're in, whether you're in admissions or you're in administration or you're in faculty or you're in research, will have different seminars available and speakers for each. So it's it'll start at 9, it'll go through till about 3:30 or 4. So it's a one-day conference, And we're just filling it in, and all the notices will be coming out very soon.
Thank you very much. And again, I know you've talked with me a number of times on it. You and your staff have spent a lot of time on this and pulling this together, and we really appreciate
Well,
it.
it's important because for just the University of South Florida alone, it represents about 1,000 of our students that we have now, not even thinking about what's going to come in next year. And I know that many of the students start at community colleges and then transfer over. So we need to be ready to support them.
Thank
So
you.
November 6th, the date?
Yes, November 6th.
November 6th.
Anything else, Richard?
That's all I
Is
have.
there any other next steps as a committee we need to be preparing for and thinking about other than November 6th on our calendar? Yes, Governor Starks.
I just want to make a comment to President Genshaw. One of the biggest problems we have in this state and in other states is young people starting college and dropping out. I mean, there's a loss of revenue, loss of money. I think with veterans who realize how important their education is going to be, hopefully we'll not have less dropouts and veterans who start and complete their education. And I think you'll find that will be a fact, President Genshaw. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I mean, obviously, this is an important initiative for this committee this year, so, Richard and Dr. Genshaft, if you see something comes up that you think we need to meet, by all means, we'll have a conference call, or if there's something we need to do to facilitate this.
Well, I do have something, and that is when we put out the invitation to come, there's oftentimes an honorary committee that we list names. So if any of the Board of Governors would allow us to list their names as honorary committee members, I would appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Does anybody have an objection to that? I think we should all, go ahead.
Is that okay?
I think it's, yeah. I don't think we have an issue with that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. That'd be great. Anything else, Richard? No? Okay, great. The next topic is a challenging one that we have talked about a number of different ways, but that the committee of all of the vice president of student affairs at our institutions felt was very important, and that's excessive alcohol use on our campuses. What they really have found is the negative consequences associated with the excessive alcohol use often interferes not only with their academic process, but their personal health and development and their time to complete graduation, and that it just has a kind of compounding impact throughout our system. And so I had challenged the vice presidents to get together and come up with some recommendations on what would be an appropriate actions or ideas for us to consider on this. So I would like to call Dr. Mary Beth Ehas up from UCF to begin the session and give us kind of an overview of what they're suggesting.
Thank you, Governor Duncan. Our purpose today is really to introduce the topic to you. This is a complex issue that we are all facing on all of our campuses, and today we hope through a short presentation to share with you information as well as explore ways that the Board of Governors can support and influence leaders in our communities across the state to work with us to decrease the risk for our students. We have two individuals who are really experts in the state that will be joining and be in the presentation. The first is Thomas Hall, who's our Director of Alcohol and Other Drug Prevention Programs here at UCF. His office was created by Dr. Hitt in 2002. He's also chair of the Florida Higher Education Alliance for Substance Abuse, an organization with membership from all of our higher education institutions in the state. This is one of the topics that we are all working together to try to resolve. We also have Chris Franzetti, who is the Director of the Partnership for Alcohol Responsibility at Florida State University.
Doctor, can you speak up, please? You're very,
Oh, you're not hearing me?
no.
Get real close to the mic, I think.
Well, I'm too close to...
No, you're
get
not
closer.
close enough.
Okay, that feels like an E. Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. Shall I start over? Okay, I'll just talk louder. Thank you. Our point today is really to introduce this topic to you, to share with you some information that is basic to all of our institutions, to invite you to work with us and support us in this effort, especially as we work with our community leaders in trying to decrease the risk for all of our students. This first slide is really simply a way to say students come to our institutions already very experienced in drinking and often using drugs. But the environment around us, very close to us, across the street from us, is actually giving them a very different message. We have been very successful on our campuses with providing programming that reduces risk, offering opportunities and alternatives for students to participate in activities where alcohol is not the center of attention. However, again, the community, the environment around us is giving a different message. It is critical in this issue that there are multiple layers of leadership. At our campuses, we all have campus task forces that are made up of faculty, staff, and students who are interested and experts in this topic. But in addition, it's very critical that we engage members of our community in working with responsible retail, other kinds of issues related to the access and the acquisition of alcohol to underage drinkers. In addition to that, we believe that we may have more impact if we can come together as a state to advocate for certain issues. So, with that brief introduction, let me turn the program over to Chris Franzetti to go over some data with you.
Good morning. I'm from New Jersey. People say they never have trouble hearing me, so I hope this is loud enough and clear. I'm Chris Franzetti. Thank you very much for having me this morning. The first slide in front of you talks about the national issue. We want to break it down nationally, statewide, and locally for you. I won't read the slide to you, but you can see that the consequences of college drinking impact not only the individual drinker, but others in their environment who may or may not have consumed alcohol. These national statistics can just give you a flavor of the harms that are experienced by the drinker as well as others. Recently in the state of Florida, we did a pilot study, the core survey, through funding from the Department of Children and Families. This is the first time we've been able to capture statewide data on higher education issues, college alcohol use, and consequences. You can see the prevalence of drinking and the negative consequences. Again, we try to look at the consequences as the harms that result not only to the drinker, but to those around them. 1 in 3 report driving under the influence. 1 in 6 report being hurt or injured. And 1 in 20 have reported unsuccessful attempts to stop drinking. The contributing factors in the campus environment are evident through this slide. These are just some samples of the kinds of influences and messages that college students get and are very much targeted by retailers in particular. In fact, I was at dinner last night at Applebee's and they had a beer pong ad right up over the bar. Apparently for students, students know how to play beer pong, and so that was an ad right there at the bar. And again, the ads you see up there show the influence of the alcohol industry and the messaging that we're sending to our students. Students come to college expecting to have a drinking culture. It's the rite of passage. They get those messages from stories from alumni. They get messages from other students. They get messages from the advertising, movies, Animal House. And again, sometimes our campuses even reinforce those messages. Alcohol is glamorized and it's marketed heavily towards our college students. Many students come in already having done some high-risk drinking in high school. The Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey that's done in Florida shows middle school students are binge drinking in our state, so it doesn't start in college. The first 6 weeks of college are the most dangerous. It's the first time they're away from home. Again, they hear stories. Apartment complexes offer beer parties and kegs as a welcome back to campus. They're bombarded again with messages about alcohol and the norm that is what you do when you come to college. Not only is the messaging that it's easy to get, it's also very free and cheap. In Tallahassee, it's more expensive to go to a movie than it is to go to a bar and drink. With the drink specials that are advertised in many campus magazines, they have a calendar. Every day of the week, they advertise which bar has which special, so students, again, are targeted. Bars advertise ladies drink free. Apartment complexes, again, welcome students back to campus with alcohol promotions. These are some examples. You have these in your packet as well. When we look at our college student behaviors and choices, we recognize that, again, individual education by itself is not effective in changing behavior, attitudes, and perceptions. We need to work with the surrounding community and the influences that they have on our students' choices, just like any other public health issue. Many communities work with retailers. You'll hear about that in a moment from our local coalition here in Orlando and Orange County. This environmental management approach is a best practice recommended by the NIAAA in their landmark study of 2002, Changing the Culture of High-Risk Drinking on College Campuses. It addresses not only best practices for individual factors, peer factors influencing each other, but also recognizing that this 3-in-1 framework needs to address factors at the institution, in our community, as well as public policy issues, laws and ordinances that regulate the alcohol industry, that regulate house parties, that regulate adults that provide alcohol to minors. And again, many of these policies can't be consistently enforced due to low funding for law enforcement agencies. But we believe that by addressing these issues on a three-pronged process through education, enforcement, and public policy, impacting responsible behavior by individuals, campuses, and communities, the quality of life for our students can definitely be improved, as well as the quality of life for our residents and citizens in our communities. This model of prevention recognizes, as your first slide showed Dr. Erzat's introduction, that individuals don't make decisions within a vacuum, that we must definitely look at the factors in the environment that impact on an individual's decision-making. Several of the slides showed you what some of those influences would be, and there are certainly a number of others. So to prevent and reduce the harms, we have to address the broad array of factors that influence individual health decisions and behaviors. To address these issues solely by influencing campus life isn't adequate to effect change. Our students live on and off campus and work, play, and study in our communities. Therefore, a comprehensive approach of education, enforcement, and public policy at the individual, institutional, and community levels is needed. Campus and community partnerships are needed. Town-gown has never been more important. Some of you live in communities where our local coalitions and those concerned about high-risk and underage drinking have worked to influence decision makers and lawmakers. A lot of that work has been going on for a number of years, particularly through the Florida Higher Education Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. Related to public policy and legislative factors, you'll see in your packets two documents. One shows gaps in Florida law related to this issue compared to other states, as well as a current list of local communities that have either tried or successfully passed various ordinances to look at overservice, keg registration, drink specials, and serving intoxicated patrons. That certainly is there for your information. This is not the end of the conversation, I hope, and certainly I know that you are interested in some legislative discussion, and we will definitely be available to help provide that information to you. One example of a successful community coalition and a strong town-gown network is here in Orange County. They've been able to really work hard with their community, the university, and with the retailers on a number of practices and public policies. They're going to tell you now a little bit about how their community came together with the county, and Tom Hall will share that information with you. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you for your interest on this topic. We presented several statistics that illustrate the scope and consequences of underage and excessive drinking at the state and national level. We briefly discussed typical contributing factors for underage and excessive drinking in the campus and community environment. And we've discussed the importance of senior leadership in supporting prevention and enforcement initiatives. In the next few minutes, I'm going to highlight how Orange County and UCF partner to develop community-wide solutions to address underage and excessive drinking. These statistics highlight the cost of underage and high-risk drinking to our community in terms of loss of life and physical injuries. From 2006 to 2008, the County Medical Examiner's Office reported that 60 underage persons who died had alcohol in their system at their time of death. One local emergency department reported an average of 250 underage alcohol-related visits per month. The economic consequences related to underage drinking also include unreimbursed medical care. Only 10% of over $14 million billed for medical care related to underage alcohol visits to the emergency department was reimbursed in 2008. Unfortunately, our community was unaware of these costs prior to the loss of 2 students in a 12-week span. In the fall of 2007, in 2 unrelated incidents, 2 18-year-old students died after being served at local bars. Both students had highly elevated blood alcohol contents before their death, both of whom had started their college careers with hope and with promise, and yet it ended on a late night on a road in Orange County, literally within walking distance of our university. Dr. Hitt and Orange County Mayor Crotty responded to these tragic losses by challenging business and community leaders to develop a plan to reduce underage and excessive drinking in Orange County. In February of 2008, they commissioned the Orange County Underage Drinking Task Force. The task force, chaired by Mike McCoy, Orange County Director of Public Safety, and Rich Morrison, Vice President of Florida Hospital, was charged with making recommendations to engage the community in prevention of underage and high-risk drinking. I have copies of the task force final recommendations that will be available for those who are interested. I'll leave these with John Rogers. The following slides highlight the work of our task force. The first order of business was to assess our resources. We found that many sectors in the community were engaged in prevention and enforcement tactics, yet we did not have a comprehensive strategic plan. We developed 4 priorities to assess current efforts and to help develop our plan. These priorities focused on building networks to share best practices and to support the efforts of multiple prevention and enforcement partners. I'll briefly highlight the contributions from each of these key stakeholders. In 1999, Dr. Hitt asked a group of faculty and staff to research best practices and make recommendations to develop a comprehensive substance use prevention effort at the university. In 2002, an office was created to coordinate campus-wide substance use prevention intervention services for UCF students. And in 2005, Dr. Ehas created a director-level alcohol advisory committee that also included faculty and community members to advise our division's prevention efforts. Highlighted efforts of the Student Development and Enrollment Services department efforts include screening and intervention. Last year, all students seen in health services were screened by their physician for alcohol abuse. Additionally, our Substance Use and Prevention and Intervention Services Office screened over 1,500 students during monthly screening alcohol screening day programs, and provided intervention for over 500 students. Last spring, we created a team of staff from Health Services, the Counseling Center, the Alcohol and Other Drug Prevention Programming Office to meet monthly to discuss high-risk substance-using clients seen in one or all of our offices. We also targeted population-level prevention. An online prevention education program is now mandated for all of our first-year students. Last year, over 6,300 students attended UCF for the first time. Only 9 failed to complete the online program. We also provide RAs with programming ideas through monthly RA kits. Each kit includes posters related to a health topic, brochures, and a newsletter with talking points so that RAs can have conversations with their residents about a relevant health topic. And I'd like to thank Carol Burkett from the Orange County Coalition. She underwrote the cost of those RA kits, which was about $10,000 through a grant. And not only are those RA kits available to the UCF campus, they're available to the campus of Rollins College, Full Sail, and are going to be distributed in a high school version as well coming next fall. We also looked at peer advocacy as a promising strategy. We create intentional opportunities for students to get involved in their community. Peer advocacy training was developed to prepare engaged students to act if they find themselves in a situation with their peers that's risky. The implicit message in advocacy training is a commitment to purposeful action. Advocacy is more than asking students to educate their peers about health and safety. It includes real-life experiences that affect the way people think and feel about health and safety. Advocates serve as opinion leaders, influencing the perceptions of healthy lifestyles and motivating their peers to act and to help create a tipping point for change on our campus. The task force included several law enforcement agencies as well. The officers identified noncompliance with minimum age drinking laws and open house parties as areas of concern. The Orange County Coalition for a Drug-Free Community worked with many local partners to procure grant funding to increase local compliance checks. Starting this fall, we'll begin quarterly compliance checks, and we'll target those bars that market to our students, where we'll send in underage students with undercover police, and we'll arrest bartenders, take them to jail if they serve our students. The group also developed a plan to recruit residential students renting houses in residential neighborhoods near Orange County colleges and universities to participate in the Community Ambassador Program. This program is modeled on the existing Citizens on Patrol. It is intended to connect students with their homeowners association and open purposeful dialogue between students renting homes and homeowners. Now, for those of you who know what an HOA is, you'll certainly understand the appeal of this initiative, especially for someone who lives in a residential neighborhood near the university. I'm looking forward to finding out who my student ambassador will be, because I've got a list of things I want to talk to him about. Associated with this effort is the development of good neighbor guides that include reminders for renters of local laws, noise regulations, and tips for responsible party hosting. The task force also included alcohol distributors and local vendors. We didn't intend to meet without them. We wanted to bring them to the table, and we did successfully. Business practices were highlighted that encourage responsible vending. Grant funding was obtained to develop a community responsible retailers forum. The university and Orange County are currently working together to promote a dialogue among our local vendors. We have several positive contacts among vendors, and we have a few that aren't so positive. However, the goals of our efforts include establishing an elite vendor program so that we can recognize those folks who are doing things well. I've been shocked to see that Applebee's routinely hosts beer pong tournaments and lingerie contests after midnight. When I watch their advertisements about something being new in the neighborhood, that's not what I take away from this so-called family restaurant. We also want to establish a retailer social marketing campaign so that we can encourage retailers to do the right thing. And the interesting thing is, in talking to retailers, they're interested in this. There's a small group of retailers that have a business plan that targets underage students, and those who are operating within the law are put at an economic disadvantage by those who operate outside the limits of the law. And so there is certainly support among vendors to create a level playing field for everyone. We also are going to create a secret shopper initiative and a new vendor support initiative so that bar owners who have it right can mentor those who are opening bars in the community to help them develop a long-term business plan and not one that's short-term. Lastly, I wanted to talk about, and I see some folks looking at their watches, so I'm wrapping it up here. But I want to talk about public policy. We successfully lobbied. One of the recommendations of the task force was to do things within what the local community could do. We didn't try to take on state laws and create new law, but we found that we could regulate, the community could regulate the hours of sales. So one of the task force recommendations was to do so. It just so happened that the city of Winter Park saw our recommendations and moved quicker than Orange County, and actually in January of 2009 passed an ordinance. They passed actually two ordinances. The first ordinance requires an additional permit to sell alcohol past 11 p.m. This is something that's within the purview of the county. Now, other things that have to do with a liquor license are within the purview of the State Department of Business and Professional Regulation, and we have no area to intervene. But in this area, we did. So under the ordinance, if 3 underage drinking violations occur within a 3-month period, the vendor is subject to a suspension of their extended hours of sales permit. In other words, they would have to shut down at 11 p.m. The city can suspend the extended hours of sales from 1 day up to a maximum of 30 days. And as a footnote, there was a vendor in Winter Park that had been egregious and was known to the police and had failed all attempts to engage them in some dialogue. And it was interesting, within 4 weeks of this ordinance passing, they actually called the police department and said, what can we do to make sure that we're complying with the law? And so we saw that as a major victory, and the police chief was very surprised at how quickly they benefited from this ordinance. The second ordinance had to do with illegal open house parties. And it's intended to hold landlords and owners responsible for legal activity, underage alcohol use, illicit drug use that occurs on their property. One of the things that we've seen in the communities around universities is that people bought houses, and then when they couldn't sell those houses, they rented them to students. Sometimes they rent them to many students, much to the chagrin of neighbors. And in Winter Park, one of the things that they found, the houses around Rollins, there were multiple students staying in these houses, and there were multiple calls for drinking and noise violations that the police really grew weary of having to come out on a routine basis. So they created this ordinance whereby landlords were put on notice after the first violation that the second violation that occurred, there would be a $1,000 fine, and the violation after that, a $2,000 fine, which again has got the attention of landlords in terms of their leases and in terms of who they rent property to. So it creates another layer of accountability. The Florida Higher Education Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention is our statewide coalition. It's operated since 2001. The coalition has over 30 member institutions. Chris Franzetti of Florida State University is our past chair. I'm the current chair. and Maureen Miller from the University of Florida is our chair-elect. Our coalition looks forward to working with the Board of Governors to identify best practices in the state university system related to substance use environmental prevention strategies. I want to thank you all for your time and attention on this critical area of study for student development professionals, and we're all available to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I think if the committee would like to ask some questions and discuss this, I mean, my hope is that we can get some feel from the committee as to what steps we would like to take. You know, is this more of an informative thing? Do we want to understand more about potential legislative agenda items that we could put on our agenda for next session that relate to some of the things they were talking about that have been successful here? Again, just kind of want to have an open dialogue and get some direction from the committee as to how we would like to proceed on this important issue. Governor Stavros.
Well, let me commend this program. I truly believe that a university prepares you academically, but also socially. I think we have an obligation as a university to do this. I have a son who was one of the top 5 in the high school class and had a choice between Georgia Tech or Duke. He selected Duke. As he got out of class, there were people giving, actually no, Duke is a cigarette university, a tobacco university. As he got out of class, he was handed free cigarettes. Every student got free cigarettes. So my son went there as a non-smoker, and he came back as a smoker. To this day, he smokes. That doesn't make us happy. My wife and I have never smoked, but that's not the point. I'm not against it. When I got back from World War II with a combat injury, the doctor said, don't smoke and don't drink. I said, if you tell me the third thing, I'm walking out of this room. I will say this, that certainly a glass of wine, social drinking, not a problem. We're concerned students don't do this. I have a fraternity, Phi Kappa Psi. I know that at FSU, they were warned about drinking at the FSU house, and not long after that, the policeman saw this U-Haul go down the street wobbling. He stopped it, and there were the Florida State Phi Kappa Psi students in this U-Haul having a drinking party, and so they were kicked off campus, and that was good. I think we have the obligation with our students because they need this type of leadership, as we just heard today, that's happening at UCF. I think that's one of them. I commend this program.
Governor Roberts.
We all know that this is a really difficult issue. When we see the tragedies that happen every semester at the universities, it brings us great sadness, but it is a difficult issue. I think this program is excellent. I think information to our students is so important, and every president is involved in that, talking to all the groups, including the Greeks, and continue with education. But it is something that's going to be difficult to control. Having sons that were in the university system not too long ago, I saw a lot of interesting and fun things. But this board has an obligation to try to educate our students and be responsible for our students. So I commend you for this, and I think it's a conversation we should continue to have. And I do think the most important way is to support the universities in educating the students, because most of them are there for an education and trying to do the right thing and have great, wonderful goals, but there are a lot of temptations, and they're young people, so we need to be realistic in our rulemaking, but encourage education.
And one of the things that I had challenged the vice presidents on was, what really belongs at a statewide policy level for this board and this committee, and what's really just a sharing of best practices and being a vehicle for that information. And, I would like to kind of, again, kind of question the vice presidents when they can meet next, maybe to come back if they have something. They were struggling with that balance too in the discussion, as was, we had a very healthy discussion when I talked with the student body vice presidents. And they realize and understand some of the challenges around this issue as well. And one of my kind of comments, just we all hear stories. We all know a number of young people in our institutions, but was the education, the online program's great, but yet it's turned into a game of who can do the most shots while they take the online program on alcohol awareness. And so is that the most effective thing we're doing, or is it? Is there something else that we can be providing, maybe by banding together and going after some grants or something for a more effective training program or not? And maybe it is, maybe that's a one-off little incidental thing. And the other thing I was going to ask the task force is, I was kind of surprised I didn't see much about parent interaction on this one, and how maybe we should or shouldn't be engaging at orientations and things on that side of the equation as well, because I think it does kind of take all of the community and the parents' engagement as well. So does anybody have any specific action or things that they would like? Yes, Dr. Solano.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it seems to me that there might be two things that we could do at our level. And of course, one is that these programs don't come free. So, even though times are tough, that may be a priority of ours in terms of trying to find some funding to support these kinds of programs on the campuses. And secondly, I note here in one of the handouts that the Alcohol Policy Coalition had been working with legislators in an attempt to strengthen liquor liability laws and the like. And certainly we're in a position to make that one of our legislative priorities, should we wish to, and try to affect change at the state level in law and policy.
If no one disagrees, I would kind of like to go back to the VPs of Student Affairs and ask them for specific recommendations if they have any items that they think we need to be doing, or if we need to discontinue this in an awareness mode. But again, knowing our staff and resources are short, I also, in fairness to the group, Dr. Solano, but also challenge them with, don't come to me with anything that costs money this year, because we just really can't do it, or something that takes a new fee or a new something. For right now, we've been kind of challenged on that front as well. But I think there was some discussion around some legislative ideas that have not been successful because of the liquor lobby, candidly. And if we were cohesively working, Dr. Yas, the one that we talked about was a bill that was looking at, I think, some of the could you have, rather than county by county on the bladder bus kind of things, or the hours or different things like that, providing something on that it wasn't going to be every single municipality was the general idea that they were looking at. So
controlling statewide hours.
Something, or just the ability to do some of the bladder bus kind of things where it's just encouraging the overindulging versus hours. There was a number of different things they were kicking around.
Well, there are two that are cited here: House Bill 415 and Senate Bill 2170 in the 2009 session that they were pushing for. And it, I don't know the history, but it says tried to get sponsors for. Mm-hmm. So that suggests to me that they weren't successful. And so we might want to dig those up and see what those said, and see if those are things we can get behind, or some version thereof.
Well, the only observation I can make from the presentation, it looks like students are coming to universities now with an experienced drinking background, which is a little different from when I went to school. But I can tell you personally, and I don't want this to be an AA meeting, but I started drinking in college because it was the thing to do. And you can very easily get caught up in that because all your peers are doing it. But if you happen to be one of those people that has a propensity to alcoholism, this is the thing that's going to get you. And it got me badly. And I think that those kinds of things, people need to be educated about it because it is not anything that's obvious. And it's so easy to do because everybody else does it and it makes you cool, but it also makes you stupid. And it also makes you dangerous. And they need to realize how serious it is, and maybe some real life stories would help.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
Yes.
One last comment. Certainly this is not a new problem. In 1946, I went out to California and I visited UCLA in Southern Cal. And I don't know whether students believe that administrators aren't bright or intelligent because they do things that are so obvious, but if they don't do something about it, then maybe we're not bright in allowing it. At UCLA, the fraternity houses were in a separate campus from the sororities, so the parties were separate. At Southern Cal, they were on the same street. So the first day of class, there'd be a party at this fraternity, the next day at this sorority, back to the fraternity. They all had hidden bars. But if you wanted to go in there, they'll show you where the hidden bar is. But this is back in 1946. So this is not a new problem. It may be greater today because the consequences are greater. So I really, again, commend this program that UCF has.
Anything over here?
Well, I just wanted to follow up with some of your comments. Certainly, we will take this back to the other vice presidents. We are having conversations, and we'll be able to come up with some specifics. I think the issue that we're talking about from a legislative or statewide point of view is sometimes you can be stuck and think the laws, stop you from doing anything. And what we have found here in Orange County, that a collaboration between the university, the county officials, law enforcement, retailers is making a difference. And that's that's the message that we want to get across. We can break it down by community. We can also try to do a statewide approach. The point is we have to do all of those things. And I think that's what we're trying to say today.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for this. It was very informative, and we'll look forward to continuing this dialogue. Next on the fun and challenging issues we're tackling with this committee is student insurance. Dr. Rogers, if you could come up and give us an update on, I guess at Chair McDevitt's request, reconvene the task force on student health insurance, and if you can give us an update on that discussion, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Just real briefly, the March meeting, we had a presentation on student health insurance, and we were directed to reconvene the task force that was active in 2006 and 2007. We have done that. We've established a streamlined task force, but with a much broader representation of campus community representatives. We have a provost on that task force, a general counsel, a director of financial aid, director of counseling, and of course a vice president of student affairs, and our new student board member will be a member. And it'll be co-chaired by our student health center directors at UNF and at FSU. That task force has three components: to give this committee an update of trends on health insurance, to examine the different types of insurance available to students and campuses, and to analyze the impact of these options on student health and well-being, on cost, the cost of attendance and financial aid, which we'll be doing that. We have a director of financial aid involved with that. And probably most importantly, we will be attempting to identify and target efficiencies that maybe we can utilize as a system, both in obtaining insurance providers and getting the best, most efficient cost. So we'll be working on that. We had an organizational call last week. We have an assignment out. We're identifying sources and resources and data to get for our task force. Our goal is to draft a report during this fall, which we will bring back to you for action and work. I might also mention there's a parallel study going on in the legislature. OPAGA, which is its advisory body, has been directed to study student health insurance. So they've begun that task. They've asked our assistants, in fact, we have a call coming up this Monday, where all of our health center directors will be online with the OPAGA staff, and they'll be offering their assistance to that group. So we've kicked it off, and we'll certainly keep you apprised of the progress of that. Yes.
Is there a targeted end date for the task force to come back? Or?
At our initial call, we talked about having a draft final report in December, so we could have maybe final action by January at the latest.
Great. Any questions? Thank you very much. And then we're going to have an update from Dr. Ihas on the Council of Student Affairs, but really in light of our substantive issues we've been talking about today, that group is continuing to convene and to work through some challenging issues and to look for opportunities that don't necessarily just necessitate additional funding to advance the cause. But I don't think, unless anybody has a specific question, yes, Dr. Stone.
I always seem to be cutting you off.
Okay.
I don't intend to. I just wanted to ask a question when we got to that section. The legislature passed some new regulations with respect to residency, which impacts our students. Has your council kind of picked apart that legislation and seen whether or not there are any unintended consequences with respect to that in terms of how it impacts our current students?
I would say that as a group, we have not started to look at that, but as institutions, we are looking at that, and I believe that different individuals in those roles, like registrars, are looking at that across the state. So there is a statewide response to how do we implement not only residency, but other like Bright Future changes, as well as excess hours. There's a number of things that we need to figure out operationally and also look at the impact they may have on enrollment and student success.
Okay, I raised the question because I received an email, and my colleagues may have as well, from a graduate student who felt that it somehow disadvantaged those students who were already in the system working to get residency. And I don't know whether that's true or not, and I just ask that it be looked at on the campuses.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment on this for 1 minute because I got involved in a lengthy discussion a while back on this shortly after the session was over from a couple of deans to whose attention it came, and they were professional programs. And it looks to me like the institutions need to take serious look at it because there's a lot of leeway in the language, and there's things that you could do when you model your tuition that might get you to exactly the same level, but you're not going like this and then like this. And so, I mean, there's things there's some language that gives you some outs under certain circumstances. So, I mean, people need to take a comprehensive look at it so that students really know where they fall in this. It's not as cut and dried as it seems to be. That's my observation on it. And it is unfortunate that they did not consider the students already in the system, but unfortunately that's the law.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. The university-wide graduate deans have put forward a proposal that they asked the lobbyists that were meeting yesterday to review, and so within that they talk about the problems that it creates for really attracting graduate students from around the country that will indeed end up finishing their degrees here. They have data on how many of them stay in the state afterwards, and so that it does have a potential for significant impact. There are some ways of mitigating that, but the ways of mitigating it don't necessarily end up being as optimal as the proposal that the system graduate dean put forward.
Great, thank you.
Yes, John?
Just real quick, this week is the SUS data workshop right across town, and yesterday all of the admission directors and registrars had a session on this bill and the impact of the legislation. an extended session, so I know it's on their radar. In fact, they got together as a system yesterday to work on it.
Thank you, and with that, we are out of time, so unless anybody has a other pressing issue or comment, the Student Affairs meeting is adjourned.